The air conditioning in the Sterling Heritage boardroom was set to a precise 68 degrees, cold enough to keep the sweat off the expensive silk suits, but freezing for anyone actually doing the work. I sat in the back corner, the spot usually reserved for interns or coats, clutching a battered tube of my grandfather's original blueprints. They were yellowed and smelling of old concrete, a stark contrast to the gleaming glass around us. "Julia, move!" my stepmother, Stephanie, snapped, waving her hand without even looking at me. "You are ruining the aesthetic of the photo." I shifted my chair back, sliding further into the shadows. Perfect. They wanted the view. I wanted the foundation. Before we see how this boardroom explodes, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is standing their ground in our community today. The vote was a formality, a ritual slaughter of 70 years of history. My father, Thomas, sat at the head of the table, tapping a gold pen against the mahogany. He did not look like a titan of industry. He looked like a man trying to outrun an avalanche. "All right," he said, his voice tight. "Let us get this done. The offer from Vanguard Developers is on the table. $850 million. Complete acquisition. All in favor?" "Hell yes," my half-brother Tyler said immediately. He was the vice president of operations, a title that meant he occupied a corner office and signed invoices he never read. He was already scrolling through a brokerage listing on his phone. I leaned over slightly and saw the screen. It was a listing for a 100-foot yacht in Monaco. He was spending the inheritance before the wire transfer even hit. "Absolutely," my half-sister Ashley chimed in. She was the vice president of branding, which mostly involved hosting influencer parties on active construction sites without insurance. "I am already looking at villas in Tulum for the celebration week," she added, flashing a smile that was all veneer. "We need to rebrand the family image, away from, dirt and steel." Thomas nodded, relieved. "That is 51% right there." "Stephanie?" My stepmother did not even look up from her compact mirror. "Yes, obviously. I have a gala to plan." Thomas turned to me, his eyes slid over me like I was a smudge on the glass. "Julia. How do you vote your 3%? Against?" I said softly. The room went quiet, but it was not the silence of respect. It was the silence of a joke landing. Tyler let out a short, barking laugh. "Against?" he repeated. "You are voting against an $850 million payout? What is the matter, safety girl? Are you worried Vanguard will not follow your little color-coded recycling protocols?" Ashley giggled. "It is cute, really. She thinks she is protecting the legacy." "Julia, honey, nobody cares about the concrete mix ratios, we care about the check." I did not respond. I did not defend myself. Instead, I looked down at the tablet resting on my knee. A notification had just popped up. It was a level red alert from the foreman at the West Side Tower project. The city inspector was on site, and the crane permit had expired at midnight because Tyler had ignored 3 renewal emails. If the permit was not renewed in the next 5 minutes, the city would issue a stop work order. The fine was $15,000 a day, plus the cost of idling a crew of 200 men. While Tyler mocked my 3% stake, I opened the regulatory portal on my screen. I accessed the master permit file, applied my digital signature as the compliance officer, and paid the renewal fee from my departmental budget. "Processing," the screen read. "Approved." I had just saved the company roughly $50,000 in penalties and lost time. I had saved Tyler's job. Again. He did not even know the inspector was there. He was too busy looking at boat interiors. "Your objection is noted, Julia," Thomas said, waving his hand dismissively, "and overruled. The motion carries. We are selling Sterling Heritage." The tension in the room broke instantly, replaced by a frantic, greedy energy. Stephanie clapped her hands. "Finally. I am going to call the realtor about the penthouse." Tyler fist-bumped Thomas. "Dad, you are a genius. Vanguard is going to strip this place for parts, but who cares? We will be liquid." I closed my tablet. The permit confirmation faded from the screen. They were celebrating the harvest, completely unaware that they had let the fields rot for years. They saw the skyline. I saw the cracks in the retaining walls. They thought this was a victory lap. I knew it was a crime scene, and I was the only one who had brought evidence bags. The cork popped with a sound like a gunshot, echoing off the floor-to-ceiling glass. Stephanie squealed, a high-pitched sound that grated against my nerves, as Tyler poured the vintage Dom Perignon into crystal flutes. It was 1996, a bottle worth more than the monthly salary of the foreman down on the site. To us, Thomas said, raising his glass. To the next chapter. They drank. I did not. I sat with my hands folded on my lap, watching the bubbles rise and burst. It was a perfect metaphor for their ambition. Fast, flashy, and ultimately, just air. At 2 o'clock sharp, the double doors opened. The Vanguard team walked in. They did not look like builders, they looked like liquidation experts. Their lead counsel, a man named Sterling, no relation, just a cruel irony, placed a leather folio on the table. He did not smile. He did not accept the champagne offered to him. "Mr. Sterling," Thomas said, putting on his best CEO smile, the one he used for ribbon cuttings. "Shall we sign?" "Let us get this done," Tyler added, leaning back in his chair, already looking bored. "I have a flight at 6. The Vanguard lawyer opened the folio. He picked up a pen, a heavy Mont Blanc, that looked like a weapon. He hovered it over the signature line. The room held its breath. Stephanie was practically vibrating. This was it, the payout, the end of the work. Then, the lawyer stopped. He did not sign. He slowly capped the pen and pushed the document away. "We have a problem," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Thomas laughed nervously. "A problem? What kind of problem? The wire transfer is set. The board approved." "The board approved the sale of the operating company," the lawyer said. "But Vanguard is not interested in buying a management structure. We are buying the assets. Specifically, the real estate, the Sky Tower, the West Side development, the industrial parks." "Yes, yes," Thomas waved his hand. "That is all included." "No, Mr. Sterling, it is not." The lawyer pulled a single sheet of paper from his briefcase and slid it across the mahogany table. "Our final title search came back this morning. We found a Level 1 title defect. Sterling Heritage does not own the land under these buildings." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. "What are you talking about?" Tyler snapped, sitting up. "Of course we own it. Grandfather built these towers." "He built them, yes," the lawyer agreed, "but he did not leave the land to the corporation. According to the county deed registry, the land rights for every major Sterling property are held by a separate entity, something called Foundations Trust, LLC. Thomas picked up the paper. His hands were shaking. I watched him closely. I expected anger. I expected him to rage at the incompetence of his legal team. But that is not what I saw. I saw fear. For years, I had looked at my father and seen a tyrant, a man who ignored his daughter to groom his son. But in that moment, under the harsh fluorescent lights, I saw the truth. I saw the hollow crown. Thomas Sterling was not a titan of industry. He was a man who had inherited a kingdom he never understood and could not rule. He had spent 30 years terrified that someone would find out he was an imposter. Selling the company was not just about the money for him, it was an escape hatch. It was his way of running away from the pressure before the walls collapsed on him. He wanted to cash out, move to a beach, and pretend he had won. He wanted to take off the crown before it crushed his neck. Now, the escape hatch was welded shut. This has to be a mistake," Thomas whispered. He looked old. Defeated. "I don't know what Foundations Trust is." "If you do not control the land," the lawyer said, standing up and closing his briefcase, "then you have nothing to sell us. Vanguard does not buy tenants, we buy landlords. Fix this, or the deal is dead." He walked out. The heavy doors swung shut behind him, sealing us in. The room exploded. Stephanie threw her glass. It shattered against the wall, champagne dripping down the expensive wallpaper like tears. Tyler was shouting at the corporate counsel on the phone. Ashley was frantically texting, probably trying to cancel a villa reservation. I stayed in my corner. I watched my father crumble. He slumped in his chair, staring at the title report. looking for a way out that didn't exist. He looked like a man who had just been told he had to go back to work. "Does anyone know who runs this trust?" Tyler yelled, slamming his fist on the table. "Who the hell owns the ground under our feet?" I cleared my throat. It was a small sound, but in the panic of the room, it cut through the noise like a diamond cutter. I turned a page in my notebook. Before I could speak, the room was shattered by a new sound. It was Thomas's private cell phone, the ringtone shrill and demanding. He looked at the screen, and the color drained from his face, until he looked like gray putty. "Answer it, Dad," Tyler snapped, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Maybe it is Vanguard coming back. Maybe they are bluffing." Thomas answered. He put it on speaker, his hand trembling too much to hold it to his ear. "Mr. Sterling," a voice boomed, crisp and impatient. "This is Director Holloway from Sovereign Capital. We just received a notification from the county clerk. A lien has been filed against the Sky Tower title." "We are handling it," Thomas stammered. "It is a clerical error. It is a breach of covenant." Holloway cut in. "Your $95 million bridge loan was secured against the clean title of those assets. With a defect on the record, you are in default. We are calling the note, Mr. Sterling. We need the full principal plus interest wire transferred by close of business tomorrow, or we begin foreclosure proceedings on the operating assets." The line went dead. Stephanie gasped, clutching her pearls in a cliché that would have been funny if the situation wasn't so dire. "$95 million? Richard, what is he talking about? We don't have debt. You told me the company was debt-free." Thomas sank lower in his chair, unable to meet her eyes. We had some cash flow issues," Tyler said quickly, stepping in front of his father. "We needed liquidity to cover the West Side expansion." Liar. I didn't say it out loud. I didn't have to. I knew exactly where that money had gone. I had seen the invoices. I had tracked the wire transfers from my basement office while they were busy picking out yacht upholstery. "That money didn't go to expansion, Tyler," I thought, watching sweat bead on his forehead. "It went to cover the cracks in the foundation of the Riverside project. You bought substandard steel to skim the difference, and when the beams started warping, you panicked. You borrowed $95 million to fix a mistake you caused, and you leveraged the entire company to do it." But Tyler wasn't done. He looked around the room, seeing the accusation in everyone's eyes, and his instinct for self-preservation kicked in. He pointed a finger straight at me. "This is her fault," he shouted, his voice cracking. "If Julia hadn't delayed the permitting process for 6 months with her obsession over safety regs, the West Side Tower would be open. We would have the cash flow. We wouldn't have needed the loan." There it was, the whisper campaign. The narrative they had been spinning for years. Whenever profits dipped, whenever a deadline was missed, it was always the safety girl's fault. I was the scapegoat. I was the bureaucratic hurdle that kept them from greatness. Ashley jumped on the bandwagon immediately. "She is right. Every time I try to schedule a PR event, Julia shuts it down because of insurance liability. She is strangling this company." They were rewriting history in real time, desperate to find a villain that wasn't looking back at them in the mirror. They were blaming the fire extinguisher for the arson. Thomas looked at me. For a second, I thought he might defend me. I thought he might admit that my delays had saved them from lawsuits that would have buried us years ago. But he didn't. He looked away. He let the lie stand because it was easier than admitting he had let his son gamble the empire. "You are useless, Julia," Tyler spat, emboldened by his father's silence. "You sit in that corner and judge us. But you have never contributed a single dollar of value to this family. You are just a weight we have to carry." I stood up. The motion was slow, deliberate. I picked up my tablet. I walked to the head of the table, past Tyler, past Ashley, until I stood next to my father. I disconnected the HDMI cable from his laptop and plugged it into mine. "You are right about one thing, Tyler," I said, my voice steady. "I have been judging you." On the massive boardroom screen, the logo for Vanguard Developers vanished. In its place, a new document appeared. A trust deed, stamped with the official seal of the county, dated 12 years ago, and at the bottom, in bold, black letters, was the name of the sole trustee. Julia Sterling. The letters were 2 feet high, projected in crisp, undeniable Helvetica against the boardroom wall. For a moment, nobody breathed. It was as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the room by the sheer weight of the name. That is a mistake," Stephanie stammered, her voice shrill. "It must be a typo. It should say Thomas. Or the family trust. Why does it say her name?" "It says my name because it belongs to me," I said. Thomas stood up, his face flushing a dangerous shade of red. He looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "Grandfather left everything to me," he sputtered. "I saw the will. I was the executor. He left the operating company to me." "He left you the business, Dad," I corrected him calmly. "He left you the glass, the steel, the brand, and the debt. But Grandfather Arthur was a builder. He knew that a building is only as good as what it stands on." I tapped the screen, scrolling down to the signature line. "It was dated 3 weeks before my grandfather died. He didn't trust you to keep the ground," I said. "He knew you liked the view from the penthouse too much. He knew you would leverage the equity to fund your lifestyle. So, he split the legacy. He gave you the Sterling Heritage Corporation. But he put the land, the physical earth under the Sky Tower, the West Side lot, the industrial parks into Foundations Trust." I looked at Tyler, who was staring at me with his mouth open, looking like a fish on a dock. "And he made me the sole trustee." "You own the building, Tyler. But I own the dirt. And under the terms of the ground lease, Clause 4, Section B, if the operating company attempts to sell, merge, or transfer assets without the written consent of the land trustee, the lease is voided." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the mahogany table that I now effectively owned. "Meaning, if you sign that deal with Vanguard, you are selling them a building they have to move." The reality of it hit them like a wrecking ball. The $850 million wasn't just gone. It had never existed. The Vanguard lawyers had seen my name on the title report and run for the hills. You knew," Thomas whispered. He sank back into his chair, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. "You knew this whole time. 12 years. You sat in that corner, fetching coffee, taking notes. And you knew you owned us." "Why?" Stephanie shrieked. "Why would you wait? If you had this power, why did you let us treat you like garbage? Why did you let Tyler humiliate you? Why did you wear those awful boots and act like a nobody?" "Because I needed you to finish the job," I said. This was the part they would never understand. The silent observer's advantage. They thought power was noise. They thought it was shouting in meetings and firing people and buying yachts. They didn't understand that true power is information. If I had asserted my claim 12 years ago, when I was 17, you would have fought me, I explained, my voice cold and precise. You would have dragged me through probate court. You would have claimed I was incompetent. You would have used your lawyers to bleed the trust dry, before I ever got control. I walked over to the window, looking out at the city my grandfather built. So, I waited. I became the safety girl. I became the invisible analyst in the basement. I let you ignore me. And while you were ignoring me, I was watching. I turned back to them. I watched you, Tyler, bypass safety protocols on the Riverside project to skim $4 million off the concrete budget. I have the emails. I watched you, Ashley, funnel $200,000 of company money into your boyfriend's consulting firm. I have the invoices. I watched you, Dad, sign off on loans you knew we couldn't repay just to keep Stephanie in diamonds. I tapped my temple. I didn't speak up because I wasn't just watching. I was building a case file. I needed you to be so arrogant, so sloppy, and so undeniably incompetent that when I finally made my move, there would be no legal recourse. I needed you to dig the hole so deep that you couldn't climb out. And today, with the default on the bridge loan and the failed merger, I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. You hit bedrock. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the server in the corner, recording everything. They weren't looking at me like a daughter or a sister anymore. They were looking at me like a judge. Tyler stood up, his face twisted in a snarl. "You think you can just steal this from us? I am the VP of operations. I run this company." "Not anymore," I said. I tapped my tablet again. A new document appeared on the screen. It was a termination notice, effective immediately. Cause: gross negligence and corporate malfeasance. You cannot fire me. Tyler sputtered, his face turning a mottled purple. I am a Sterling. My name is on the building. Your name is on the liability insurance policy, I corrected him. And right now, you are the single biggest risk to this company's survival. I swiped the screen again. A grid of photos appeared: cracked concrete, rusted rebar, falsified inspection reports, signed with Tyler's distinctive scrawl. You bypassed structural integrity checks on the Riverside high-rise to save 4 weeks on the schedule, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a cold wind. You used non-compliant steel. If that building had gone up the way you wanted, it would have come down in the first minor tremor. You didn't just steal money, Tyler, you almost killed people. He froze. The bluster drained out of him, replaced by the terrified look of a child caught playing with matches. I am not just firing you, I continued. I am revoking your access to all company accounts, premises, and digital assets. Security is waiting in the lobby to escort you out. If you fight this, I will hand this entire file to the district attorney. You won't just be unemployed. You will be indicted. He looked at Thomas, silently begging for a reprieve. But Thomas was staring at the table, unable to witness the demolition of his golden boy. Tyler grabbed his jacket and fled, the heavy door slamming shut behind him. I turned to Ashley. She shrank back in her chair, clutching her phone like a shield. Julia, wait, she started, her voice trembling. The branding. We have contracts. The influencers are already booked for the gala. Cancel them, I said. I pulled up a spreadsheet. It was a simple bar graph. One bar was massive, her spending. The other was microscopic, her revenue generation. You spent $3 million last year on parties and social media campaigns, I said. Do you know how many commercial leases we signed because of your Instagram feed? 0, not one. We sell skyscrapers, Ashley, not skin cream. But my image, she whispered. Your department is dissolved, I said. The marketing budget is reallocated to engineering and safety compliance. You can stay on as a junior consultant if you want to learn how the business actually works. But the corporate card is deactivated as of 5 minutes ago. She looked at Stephanie, expecting support. But Stephanie was staring at me with wide, fearful eyes. She knew what was coming. And you, Stephanie, I said, not even bothering to bring up a slide. The gala is cancelled. The interior design retainer for your consulting firm is terminated. You have treated this company like your personal ATM for 20 years. That account is now closed. She opened her mouth to scream, to cry, to manipulate, but she looked at my face and stopped. There was no purchase there. I was a wall of smooth, unyielding concrete. Finally, I turned to my father. The room was quiet now. The parasites had been purged. It was just the king and the architect. Thomas Sterling looked at me. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked exhausted. The fear I had seen earlier, the terror of the imposter, was gone, replaced by a strange, hollow resignation. I suppose you want my resignation, too, he said quietly. No, I said. He blinked, surprised. I need a chairman, Dad. I need someone to shake hands, cut ribbons, and reassure the investors that the Sterling name is still strong. You are good at that. You look the part. I slid a single document down the long table toward him. It was an amended operating agreement. But you are done making decisions, I said. You don't sign checks. You don't approve loans. You don't touch operations. You are the face. I am the brain. I run the company. You get a salary, a title, and your dignity. But I get the control. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at the empty chair where Tyler had been, the weeping figure of Ashley, the stunned silence of his wife. He looked at the empire he had almost destroyed because he was too weak to carry it. For a moment, I thought he would fight. I thought his ego would demand a war. But then, he picked up the Mont Blanc pen, the one he had tried to use to sell us out an hour ago, and he signed. It wasn't an act of submission. It was an act of relief. He was handing me the heavy crown he had never wanted to wear. Thank you, he whispered. He stood up, leaving the signed paper on the table. "Come on, Stephanie," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Let's go home." They filed out, ghosts of a regime that had finally fallen. I was alone in the boardroom. The hum of the air conditioning seemed louder now. The view of the city skyline through the glass was the same, but for the first time in my life, it didn't look like a fortress I was trying to breach. It looked like work to be done. I walked down the hall to the corner office. It had been Thomas's, my father's, for 30 years. But he had never really inhabited it. It was too clean. Too sterile. He treated it like a showroom. I pushed the door open. The smell of expensive leather and fear still lingered. But I walked past the mahogany desk, past the awards he had bought, straight to the bottom shelf of the display case. There it was. Pushed behind a stack of unread architectural digests. A battered yellow hard hat. Scuffed and stained with 50-year-old concrete. Grandfather Arthur's. I picked it up. It felt heavy, real. I remembered the day he gave it to me. I was 8 years old, standing in the mud of a new foundation, ruining my Sunday dress. My father had yelled at me to get out of the dirt. But grandfather had laughed. He knelt down, wiped a smudge of clay from my cheek, and pointed at the steel rebar jutting out of the earth. "You build a skyscraper from the mud up, Julia," he had said. "The penthouse is just decoration. The mud is the strength. Never forget the mud." My father had spent his life trying to scrub the mud off the Sterling name. He wanted the prestige without the work. He wanted the height without the depth. And it had almost cost us everything. I put the hard hat on. It was a little big, but it fit better than the crown my father had tried to wear. I walked to the window. I didn't look at the horizon. I looked down. Way down. To the active construction site 30 stories below. The ants, the workers were moving steel, pouring concrete, building the future one beam at a time. They were the ones Tyler had endangered. They were the ones Ashley had ignored. They were the ones Thomas had almost sold down the river. I picked up the desk phone. I dialed the site foreman's number. He answered on the second ring, sounding wary. He knew about the merger. He probably thought I was calling to shut down the site. "This is Julia Sterling," I said. "Cancel the stop work order, the sale is off, we are keeping the building." There was a pause, heavy with static. Then, a sigh of relief so loud I could hear it through the receiver. "Copy that, Miss Sterling. We are getting back to work. And Jim," I added, "tell the crew overtime is approved. We are fixing the foundation properly this time." I hung up. I walked out of the office, past the boardroom, past the stunned receptionist. I took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out the front doors. I didn't get into a town car. I walked straight onto the dirt of the active site next door. The air smelled of dust and diesel and wet concrete. It was the best thing I had ever smelled. It smelled like freedom. I wasn't the heiress anymore. I wasn't the safety girl. I was the builder. And for the first time in 12 years, I was standing on solid ground. Sometimes you have to let the tower crumble to save the foundation. If you have ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up, share this story. Let's build something real together.